I'm so excited to be here this morning with everyone to give everyone really kind of a full introduction to not only Xamarin, but also Xamarin for Visual Studio 2017 and some of the brand new productivity tools built right into Visual Studio 2017 that Xamarin developers can take advantage of today. It's gonna be really awesome. We're gonna talk about some C#7 features, some brand new powerful refactoring tools, some brand new templates, a whole bunch of good stuff for Xamarin developers. Now, if you don't know who I am, I'm James Montemagno. I'm a principal program manager on the mobile developer tools team here at Microsoft. I live in this bright, sunshiny city of Seattle, Washington. And I moved here 6 years ago actually to become a mobile developer, and I fell in love with Xamarin. Started working for Xamarin over 4 years ago, and now I'm here at Microsoft, really enabling developers to really leverage all the amazing tools with Visual Studio and Xamarin to build native apps. Not only do I build awesome apps all the time, but I drink all of our coffee, and building those applications, my favorite part of my job is giving it all back. So open sourcing all the libraries and apps I create. Now you can find me anytime after this webinar. You can email me directly, motts@microsoft.com, or find me on Twitter at James Montemagno. That's probably the easiest way to get a hold of me. But I additionally have a few more ways that you can listen to me after this webinar. So if you want to hear some more Xamarin goodness, 2 different ways. I actually do a podcast called Merge Conflict. You can go to mergeconflict.fm. It's a weekly development podcast that I do with my good friend Frank Kruger. If you're a little bit more visual, I actually have a show on Channel 9, which is called The Xamarin Show. Very, very straight and to the point. It's a show about Xamarin. It comes out every single week, and you just go to xamarinshow.com. All sorts of good content on there as well. So let's get into it. Today we're going to do a few things. I'm going to do kind of a getting started with Visual Studio 2017, like what's changed. There's a lot of brand new enhancements in just the installation process. We're going to take a look at VS 2017 and how to get started with Xamarin. And of course, we're going to take a look at some brand new productivity improvements. Now, towards the end, I'm going to kind of recap all the announcements from the Visual Studio 2017 launch, give you some resources, and we'll do some live Q&A as well. Now, don't worry, because this webinar is recorded, so if you have to drop off at any time, like we kind of mentioned earlier, it's okay. We'll send it out to you. So let's get into it. When you think of Visual Studio, it's a whole suite of different IDEs and tools for developers. And I like to put all this on one slide, and I really like how they did this in the Visual Studio family. And I'll be focusing on Visual Studio 2017 on the PC side of things, but we also have tools for every single platform, kind of every developer, no matter where you're at. So we have Visual Studio for Mac, which I'll talk about a little bit at the end. VS Code, which is a rich text editor with some really cool, awesome tools in it. The brand new Visual Studio Mobile Center, which is kind of your one-stop shop mission control for your mobile applications. And of course, Visual Studio Team Services. So kind of every single thing in the DevOps and source code repos that you need are all there. And when you combine this all with Azure, you really have every single thing that you need as a developer for your front ends, your back ends, everything like that. Now, of course, we announced the general availability of Visual Studio 2017. So you can just download it, install it, you're good to go. And you can get it by going to visualstudio.com. So when we talk about Visual Studio 2017, there's some really core fundamental pillars, I would say, that we're focused on. First are kind of the fundamentals. So getting started, opening things, opening files, opening projects, editing projects, essentially, the fundamentals to get started. And additionally, a little bit more than just the IDE, the code editing experience itself, kind of the fundamentals of being productive. How can we help developers be more productive every single day? Of course, with any single front end, you need a back end, and that's where Azure and our cloud integrations and brand new services for creating web applications and Azure integrations come in. Of course, mobile is what we'll really kind of focus on today, so building native applications with Xamarin and Visual Studio. And of course, DevOps. I talked a little bit about Visual Studio Team Services and Mobile Center, so kind of how we're offering DevOps solutions for every single developer, no matter how you're developing. So I want to get right into it. I don't want to waste too much time. I want to just kind of show you where to get started with Xamarin for Visual Studio. How do you get installed on your machine before we jump into some more complex demos? So we're here just on my desktop. And when you go to install Visual Studio 2017, you're going to get this installer. This is the brand new unified workload installer. So what we see here is that we have Windows development. So I've selected UWP and .NET desktop development. We also have ASP.NET, Azure, data. If you wanted to do Office or Node.js development, it's there. Right under mobile is where you're going to select mobile development with .NET. So that's all your Xamarin goodness in one place. And then on the bottom, I've also selected Visual Studio Extension deployment and .NET Core support here. Now, these are what I installed. And when I installed this was about 30 or 40 gigs of data because it's like everything under the hood. Now, if you don't select anything, you'll kind of get a core development shell of a Visual Studio. And that only takes about like 5 minutes, 4 or 5 minutes, I want to say, to install. The nice thing is when you modify it here, which I've just launched the Visual Studio installer, which is an actual desktop app here, I can modify it at any time. So actually what I did here is I went into this, which is the installer, hit modify, it queried my machine, and I can add and remove workloads at any time, which is really, really awesome. So this actually, my entire installation took about 30 minutes, which is crazy impressive. If you've ever installed Visual Studio before, you usually have to wait a little bit. But with all these workloads, I was able to download and install everything in under a half an hour and get everything I need for my development space set up. So once you have this installed, go ahead and close out of this installer, you're going to get Visual Studio 2017. There it is. This is your brand new getting started. There's some developer news you can pull out. I've also installed some extensions here. So if I go into Tools, Extensions, and Updates here, let me go ahead and pull up this dialog. We can see that I have installed a few things. Let me go to my install here. I've installed the Android Key Store Signature tool, the editor config, which I'll talk about in a little bit, and the GitHub extension. So what's really nice is when you go ahead and have like GitHub installed, it will go out and it'll authorize. And here I can go ahead and go down to my account. And if I want to get one of my projects, I can download, clone it. And it's going to start by pulling out the Team Explorer and downloading everything right away. Now, what I love about this is that once I've cloned the actual solution, this is this little coffee cup application that I have, is that this is actually in a folder view. So right here, it just pulled up the entire artwork. So I could actually open the README file that's here. And there it is, which is really nice. So I get this little thing here with all the markdown kind of highlighted. But it's not like launching my solution, but it gives me this nice overview of my project. And if I wanted to, I could just double tap on the solution, and then that's going to open up the solution right inside of Visual Studio. So it's kind of that nice experience that I don't have to leave the IDE to search whether I'm on TFS or on VSTS or on GitHub. All of my projects and everything like that are in one nice place. So we'll go ahead and let this spin up. And one of the huge improvements that comes with Visual Studio 2017 was actually how fast that loaded all these projects, UWP, the backend project, UI projects, all that stuff. And we did a video of, well, this is a little bit smaller, but of a 2015 versus 2017 installation side by side of actually opening Roslyn, which is a humongous project. So let me go ahead and show you that video really quick. I'm just going to go ahead and launch it here. So on the left-hand side, we have Visual Studio 2015, and the idea is how fast can we get to actually opening the project and searching the code. So on the right-hand side, we have Visual Studio 2017, and by I think like second 14, 15, it's already loaded 153 projects, and I'm searching for a file, and boom, it's loaded in 18 seconds. Well, in 2015, it's still like looking and needs to install extensibility tools, and it's loading the projects, and it takes over 30 seconds. I think in some aspects, like 35, we can see all those initializers coming through. And if you're a Xamarin developer, or .NET developer, you're used to like having large projects with a lot of stuff. Yeah, so it's like, oh geez, yeah, 40, 45, 46 seconds at this point. So just how much time we've shaved off of just actually opening a project. It's really bananas, the speed improvements that are in there. So not only just opening the projects, but adding the projects. And of course, it'll import all of your past preferences in your IDE. So if you're in Visual Studio on multiple machines, it pulls everything back and forth. So the next thing I wanted to talk about was like how we've gotten started, installed Xamarin for Visual Studio, and what does Xamarin bring to the market? So I want to do a brief overview of how Xamarin works, how the tooling is, and we're going to start building out some applications and show you some templates in the IDE and what's brand new. So over a year ago, just a little bit over a year ago, Xamarin joined Microsoft to really help bring native cross-platform development in C# to every developer all over the world. And since then, we've done some really amazing things as Microsoft and Visual Studio and Xamarin all together. And in fact, there's just so much that has been going on. Since we joined Microsoft, we've not only open sourced all of Xamarin Forms, our Android, iOS, all of the Xamarin iOS, Android has all been included in Visual Studio. So there's nothing else to purchase or anything like that. So even Visual Studio Community Edition, it's all built in. We've added all sorts of cool stuff like multi-process debugging, the inspector, hybrid AOT, TLS 1.2 support, and awesome Skia I'm in love with. And really this open source has really done so much. So one of the key focuses is our .NET runtime, which is Mono, which has been relicensed under MIT. And what this has allowed, not only the open sourcing of Mono, but Xamarin Forms, is other companies to really leverage and bring awesome new features into the .NET ecosystem. So one thing that Samsung did, for instance, is they standardized on a .NET Core backend for their Tizen platform, which powers 50 million different devices all over the world. And they chose Xamarin Forms as their user interface front end. So you can target all sorts of different Samsung devices. But we've also worked really hard with other leading companies such as Unity, which is the most popular game engine out there, and help them bring our Mono over to the Unity game engine. So soon Unity developers will be able to take advantage of all the good .NET stuff and start implementing some .NET standards. So one library for all, which is really great. So let's talk about creating 5-star applications and what we do inside of Visual Studio with Xamarin to do that. So for me, I fell in love with Xamarin over 6 years ago at this point because it really enabled me to create beautiful native user interfaces, get access to every single API on the different platforms, and of course, get great native performance. And I've always said it in every single session I think I've ever given, which is that truly anything that you could do in Objective-C, Swift, or Java, you can do it in C# inside of Visual Studio. And what we really enable developers to do is build a shared C# business logic backend of their applications. So this means all your models, view models, RESTful service calls, SQL databases, things that are exactly the same across all the different platforms. And then we let you build out a unique user interface and access every single API for iOS, Android, and Windows. But you're sharing that bulk of .NET that's there. Now, for the user interface part, we have two approaches. We have the Xamarin native approach, which again is sharing that business logic backend, but you're creating an iOS storyboard, Android XML file, and Windows XAML file for the user interface. But all the logic and the code behind those files is all C#. You never have to write Objective-C or Java. Everything is in C#, every single API. And I'll talk a little bit about how that works. And then we have Xamarin Forms, which sits on top of Xamarin Native and enables you to build a shared native user interface. So what we did is we abstracted common UI controls across iOS, Android, and Windows platforms, and you build everything in a XAML type markup. And then so we don't lose that native goodness, we lay down native controls, and that's what is rendered. So nothing at all is drawn. It's the native control that is laid down. But of course, it's a abstraction, which means that it's kind of a subset of what's common across all the different platforms. So Xamarin Forms is really great for a lot of different applications. You can see here a few applications that were made, including the open source Evolve app that I built. But enterprise applications, conference applications, Coca-Cola uses it for their iPad application for when their field services are out in the market, vending the machines and updating the machines. So there's a lot of different use cases for it. And a lot of developers ask me, like, which one do I pick? And I think with Xamarin Native, the first approach here, you're always getting that one-to-one performance with a native language application. So if you need your application to start in sub 2 seconds or sub 1 second, you're doing lots of images and you need to worry about compression, you have custom animations and custom controls and all this stuff, it's a good idea to go down this route. And I've always recommended to learn the basics of iOS, Android, and of course Windows before moving to something like Xamarin Forms. So, but both are great approaches, and we recommend kind of walking through the different approaches and prototyping to see what works best for you. So let me talk about how it works now that we've kind of talked about Xamarin. I think as a Windows developer, we're used to essentially having all of .NET available to us. So we have .NET on the bottom here, and if I wanted to go to UWP or ASP.NET or something like that, I would download an SDK and I would essentially get some brand new namespaces associated with it. And you can think of it exactly the same when I want to go to Android or iOS with Xamarin. So here are all the Android namespaces on top, but all that .NET goodness on the bottom. So we have all that Android goodness on top, every single API in C#, and then we have all of .NET on the bottom. So Xamarin first brings all of .NET, of course, to Android and iOS. Now, what's really the huge advantage here is you get all of .NET running natively on the different devices, so with our .NET runtime, but you get those C# bindings around every single API in iOS and Android. So we add C# features like async await, events, lambdas, delegates, things that we know and love as C# and .NET developers. And we're able to leverage amazing native performance across all the different platforms. So on iOS, we do a full ahead of time compilation. We take your C#, compile it down into IL, an intermediate language, and compile it one more time into LLVM bytecode and send that through an LLVM compiler and optimizer. So really at the end of the day, what's important to us as developers is that we get a native ARM binary running natively. Everything's ahead of time compiled, which is really great for our users. Our users just go to an app store, they download it, they have no idea that it was built with Xamarin, nor should they. It's just a great app that you built. Same thing on Android. So we actually do a just-in-time compilation and run our runtime side by side the Dalvik Art runtime on Android. And again, the nice thing here is that a Xamarin application is native. So once you have your application built inside of Visual Studio, well, you go through the same publishing processes that a native language iOS or Android developer would go through, and publishing it right to the App Store or distributing it in-house. What's great is that we've always offered same-day support for iOS. We've been shipping same-day support for iOS since iOS 5, and we've gotten really, really close on Android. Usually, Google doesn't have too long of a development time before releasing, and often Android we have a little bit of time to wait. On iOS, it's really important to make sure you're testing and doing all that stuff on your devices, because on day one of like iOS 10, the first week or two, 50, 60, 70% of all users upgrade. On Android, I just checked yesterday, I think, on the Android dashboard, which is Google's dashboard of compatibility and things like that, 2.4% or something like that. We're on the latest version of Android, so you got some time. But we already have support for the latest version of Android 7.1, and of course, new support for all of the iOS dot releases. But to me, it's always been about more than phones and tablets. I think this is something really unique about Xamarin, and why I really love it is that I can target any single device no matter what it is. So if I want to create an Apple Watch application or Android Wear, or target any of the Amazon Fire devices like Fire TV or the Fire tablets, or even Apple TV applications, I can do that with Xamarin all in C#. Now, I'm really excited because how we're going to share code is really going to transform. We're essentially unifying the .NET framework, and this is a kind of not a huge fan of this diagram, but it kind of gets the point across, is that whether I'm building applications in Xamarin, or I'm using .NET Core, or an ASP.NET Core, I'm building a WPF or WinForms application, I'm just building applications. And what I want to do as a developer is essentially create one library with a known set of APIs that I can share across any implementation of .NET, no matter where it's running. And then just stuff works. And I can use Visual Studio, I can use it on the Mac, I could use VS Code, I could use command line, it could be built anywhere, it could be published anywhere. So this is how we're kind of unifying the .NET platform together. Now, what's really exciting is inside of Visual Studio, we're really enabling developers to write code faster with a lot higher quality. We're building tools to help be super productive when building applications. So there's a lot of things that we've done, including in Visual Studio 2017, include the inspector, the Xamarin Profiler, the Xamarin Forms previewer, the iOS simulator, and workbooks and templates and all this great stuff. And besides just talking about some circles, let's actually go ahead and do it, and let's build some mobile applications. So I'm going to jump over, and I'm just going to go ahead and launch a new instance of 2017 here. And so here's this. Here we go. Cool. So when I get started, essentially, I have a bunch of other projects that I've opened on the left-hand side. What's nice here is that it actually shows me that I've, in the last week or so, opened a GitHub project on another machine, so I could actually open it there. Now, when I get started, you can open projects, folders, websites. I just go down here to this More Projects. And when I do that, this is going to bring up the brand new, what kind of your tried and true project dialog, but there's going to be new options here. So we have .NET Core installed. Here's that .NET Standard class library that I showed you earlier. We have new things like Android. So we have some single view application. We have a iOS application here, and here's Apple Watch. So here's all the Apple Watch 2 and 3 applications. Extensions, all these are brand new. So if you want to do iMessage applications or notification services and photo editing extensions, you can do that. Under Universal, you have iOS Universal apps, and you even have tvOS applications. So if you want to create a game or an application for Apple TV, you can do that right here. Now, when you get started here under cross-platform, these are kind of our cross-platform templates. So create your shared project or portable class library to share code. And you can select if you want to use Xamarin or Xamarin Forms. So let me show you what that looks like here. So when we pull up this dialog, we see blank application, we see master detail, and then we see what kind of UI technology I want to create. So a blank app will just give you a blank app, and I can select Xamarin native. So I'll get iOS storyboards, Android XML, things like that. Under Xamarin Forms, I would get a shared XAML user interface for a blank application. I can then say, do I want shared projects or a portable class library project? And what's really unique is under master detail is that I can actually come in and say, oh, I want Xamarin Forms. I want a shared project. And we realize that almost every single application out there needs a backend. And we have a backend called Azure, and specifically a service inside of it called Azure Mobile Apps, which helps developers build an online-offline data synchronization layer, including push notifications and authentication right into their application. So when you check host in cloud, what it will do is it will come in and it'll start scaffolding out my application. It will go in and we can see all the different accounts that I'm logged in here with. And it'll start to go and find my subscriptions, my resource groups, and I can create them from scratch here based on the different accounts that I'm logged in with, which is really nice. There we go. There's all this other stuff going on. Now, once I have it all set up, I can hit create and it'll go off and it'll scaffold out my project. Now, I wanted to take a little bit of time though and kind of walk through one that's already been opened up for me. I've modified it a little bit, but I'll walk through some of the changes that are here. So when I come into the project, let me go ahead and just zoom in over here. We can see that I have a mobile app backend. So this is an ASP.NET application that'll run all my logic, my online, offline data synchronization that I can push up to Azure. I still have an Android, iOS, and a Windows 10 UWP application. I've selected Xamarin Forms here. So I have a portable class library, which is going to have all my shared code. And I have things like services. So I have my data layer that's here. I have some interfaces. I have my models. So here's this item that's in here. I have view models and I have views that are in here. So if I was to look at the item detail page, for instance, we can see we have some XAML up here for Xamarin Forms. Let me just show you what this application looks like out of the box here for Android and iOS. Or sorry, for Windows. So here I have a few different items that I've added, and there's some default ones in here. So when I come in, I get tabbed view. So I have a browse and I have about, and I can hit new and I can say, hello VS 2017. And then I'm going to hit save. And when it comes over here, we can see it's added and inserted in the top. On Android, I can come down and do a little pull to refresh here. And this is going to go out and it's going to talk to my Azure backend. There we go. Where's it at? There we go. Hello Visual Studio 2017, and it's good to go. And I'll say, come over here and add a new one. And I'll say, hello from Android. Type this out. I'm not sure why my keyboard wasn't working, but it is what it is. So now I'll make sure that it's all refreshed, synced up. We come over here. Boom, there it is. And what that's done is when I deployed that backend, it actually created my Azure mobile app backend. So here's my items. I'm on the default free plan. And I've just actually assigned it a local database. We can see some of the events coming in here, the requests that are coming in real time, which is really cool. Now, I was able to launch these in a few ways. So when we kind of walk through the IDE and I say set Android as the startup project, we're first going to notice that we have some new Visual Studio emulators. Now, they do have really long names, but they're very descriptive. So let me go ahead and point out exactly what these are. So we can see Visual Studio Android 23, 23, 23. So that's the API level. And we have ARM and x86 emulators. x86 emulators are powered by the Intel Haxum virtualization software. The downfall there is that the Intel Haxum, the positive is that it's a really fast emulator, but it's not compatible with Hyper-V. If you need the Hyper-V emulators, you can go and download the Visual Studio Hyper-V emulators for Android. Those are still available. But the nice thing here is that in our toolbar, I can actually open up the Android Device Manager, which will allow me to specify and create new Android images. So AVD is an Android virtual device. So I'll make this a little bit smaller. So these are longer names, so you could rename them and create new ones. But I can go ahead and hit create. And here, for instance, I could just start creating and targeting newer API levels and for whatever emulators that I have installed. A big perk here is that inside of this emulator here, which is again, nice and super fast, is that it actually does have Google Play services installed. So it has maps and messaging and photos and play games. So you can test a lot of the Google Play services right here. So that's kind of a big bonus to having this. Of course, you can plug in a device and a device will show up right in the list inside of Visual Studio. Now, of course, when I switch over to UWP and I set that as my startup, I can start on a local machine, on a remote machine or a device or a simulator. And I could optionally download new emulators for Windows 10 if I wanted to test it on a Windows 10 mobile device. Now, there's one other operating system, of course, that we want to target, which is iOS. So when I set my iOS project as my startup, we can see up inside of the toolbar, there's a few things going on. I have iPhone and then I have iPhone Simulator. Now this is connected to my Mac. We can see it's green here. So I pull that up. We can see that this is being connected to and talking to our actual iOS device here. So we have my motsbook.local, my IP address, and it's connected. And that means that it's going to go out and talk to my Mac. And here's all my simulators. And when I hit debug, what it's going to do is it's going to go out and it's going to start to create our and launch a remote iOS simulator for Windows. So I'll wait for this to build up. There we go, building. And I should say here, this is again a Xamarin Forms application. I'll make these fonts a little bit bigger too, why not? There we go. So for instance, we have that stack layout, the description, all the data binding going on and the different layers that are inside of it. So let's go ahead and see here. Oh, there's our remote iOS simulator for Windows, and I have a bunch of different applications on it. So I'll wait for it to deploy here. Should be deploying ready. Let's give it a second. There we go, launching application. Now, one of the nice things about the remote iOS simulator is that it actually gives you full touchscreen support. So if you're on a Surface Book or something like that with the touchscreen, you can modify it, pinch to zoom, do a bunch of things like that. So here now we'll actually get our Android. There's hello from Android. I can come over here. I can actually type on it. There we go. I'll say hello from iOS. I'll hit save here. Let's go ahead and launch the My Items application again. There we go. We can refresh it over here. And now it's on a full round trip. And of course, here's our Windows 10 application. So this is a really nice default template to do cloud enabled or not cloud enabled based on what you want to get this application up and running really fast. So kind of scaffolds, if you will, a full application inside of Visual Studio. And I really like it because you're getting the nice native looks and feels on all platforms. So inside of Visual Studio, there's a few other things that we can do. If I set the Android, let's say as my startup, here I'm inside of Visual Studio Enterprise. So there's a few enterprise features such as the remote iOS simulator for Windows, our profiler, and our inspector. There's some really nice things that you can do here. Under Analyze, for instance, you can actually launch the Xamarin Profiler. And what this will do is it will go ahead and deploy the iOS or the Android project since I have it as the startup. And then what it'll do, it will go out and actually start a profiling session right inside of Visual Studio. You can profile iOS and Android applications on both Mac and PC. So now it's going to close down the application and go ahead and relaunch it. So let's give it a second there. And there's our profiler. Boom. Now this is nice, and we'll put some links, send out some links. I did a Xamarin show on this actually with Nina. You can do things like allocations and cycles and memory performance, and I can just go ahead and hit choose. And now what this will do is it's going to relaunch the application. I can put it side by side. And I can do things like pause it. I can take screenshots. I actually get this nice overview of what's taking the most processing and memory inside of my actual application. So there we go. Nice. I can go and do my call tree. It's actually probably spinning up here, so we'll give it some time. And we can see what objects are allocating the most space, and we get these allocations per thread. So we can really come in, and I can actually take a snapshot. So I could do some navigation back and forth, and I could compare those. I could save it offline for later, and I can start to go through and do some performance analysis of my application, the CPU spikes. It can automatically detect cycle references in the application and help you really fine tune your application. Another feature I really like over here is if I go ahead and launch the Android device again, is a way to actually start modifying and updating our user interface in real time, which is really cool. So here I'm just going to launch the Android emulator. There we go, into our device. Wait for it to spin up, I would say. There we go. So now let's say I was going to go add a new item here. I can actually come up into Visual Studio and hit this Live Inspect button. And when I do that, it's going to launch our Xamarin Inspector. There we go. It's going to tell me there's an update available. That's good. There we go. Let's go ahead and close that. And what this will do is it'll actually make a real-time connection over to my Android application. So here I'm going to say View Inspector, and this is going to give us a 3D visualization of our entire project. We can see we have a window background there and kind of the toolbar up there. Now this is the Android view, but we've updated this here to say, oh, this is the Xamarin Forms view. So we actually get a darker outline here, and that's because the background is actually transparent. So if I tap on the stack layout, on the right-hand side, we'll actually get a property grid of all the Xamarin Forms specific properties that are on here. So I can actually pull this out. There we go. We'll make this a little bit bigger on a lower res screen. I can actually start modifying the values here. And I can say, oh, this is the perfect color that I want for this background. And I can go ahead and refresh this view, and it updates in the view. I can come down and say, oh, you know what I would really like is on this label, for instance, maybe I really want to make the height request really large, and I can start modifying the height request of this in real time. So as it gets really big, like what is it going to look like when it comes out on the device to and from? So you can just start modifying values right inside of the inspector, which I love. Some other things that we have are the preview of the Xamarin Forms previewer. So under other windows, the Forms previewer, what this will do is, I'm going to pull it out here, is it will start a live session to actually visualize our page and our Xaml in real time. So it's actually spinning up a full render, almost like a designer of our application that could be run. And what I did is I have the XAML file open on the left, and on the right-hand side is the previewer. So we'll go ahead and let it initialize really quick here for a second. And essentially what it's doing is it's running my code in real time, essentially here. So here I don't actually have very much going on, but I could come in and say I would like a new button, and we have really rich IntelliSense. So here it's actually going to say hello world. There we go. Let's go ahead and pull this out. Doop, doop. There we go. When I save it, now we have hello world over here. I can come in, and then we'll have another label. So this is the detail page. So there's data binding. So I'll say text equals. There we go. And see, we have really rich IntelliSense right there for all the properties and events that are going on. So I'll say VS 2017 is awesome. Bup, 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 bup. There we go. Awesome. Now I can also start modifying some properties. So maybe I want the horizontal options to be center, and I really want the color. There we go. Text color to be, is there an orange? There we go. Orange. Perfect. So now we can start creating our user interface and previewing on both iOS and Android and go back and forth. And we can see tablet view, and we can see landscape view of this application to see what it would look like on an iPad or on a phone, for instance, right here from Visual Studio. Now the Xamarin Forms previewer is in preview still, and it's available to all Visual Studio. So if you have Community Edition or Pro, it's going to be available right there, which is really cool. Now, what I do love about this is that this is a full application that's been scaffolded out and it has all the different backends that you possibly could need. Whereas if I open a brand new instance of Visual Studio, we could start to build out a blank application. I can show you that experience here. So if I was to come in and go into more project templates again, I can come into Cross-Platform and hit OK. This is going to open up a new blank, maybe native app with a portable class library, and I'll hit OK here. Now, we'll see something a little bit different because this is not a Xamarin Forms application. This is going to be a Xamarin native application. So we don't have the user interface inside of XAML. It'll all be in iOS storyboards or Android XML files for those specific applications. So we'll go ahead and walk around what this experience will look like to start building out applications. So give it a few seconds here. Perfect, there we go. So now it's actually created our actual portable class library. I have a little my class application, or a little class, I should say, which is a blank class inside of here where I have some references. And I still have my Android and I have my iOS application. I could go ahead and add a desktop application. I could add a UWP application. And as we scroll down and walk through these applications, we can see that we have a brand new thing called Connected Services. So Connected Services allow you to add some things like an Azure backend, cloud storage, or Office 365 APIs, which is a really nice new way of doing this. Additionally, just like you would expect for Xamarin native applications, is that here I have a main Android XML and a storyboard. So when I actually double click on the main Android XML, this will open up our Android designer for Visual Studio. So we'll go ahead and let it load up. There we go. So it's going to load this file. And when I pull out the toolbox, what we're going to see is all of the Android widgets on the left-hand side. What the blank application does is it will give us a layout and a designer file with just like a button that we can click over and over again. And there's just a blank application. I can browse different themes. I can browse Android versions that I have installed. And I can simply just drag and drop out, different widgets that I want in real time into this designer, which is really nice. Same thing is true over on iOS as I have my main storyboard file. So this is going to go ahead and open our iOS designer for Visual Studio. So again, this is going to be connected over to the Mac. So we can see the green checkbox here, just like we had previously. And this will go out and it'll generate and spin up our designer for Visual Studio for iOS. And what we'll see here is that if I actually pull out where's my view properties? Somewhere. So many windows. Property manager. Oh, that's probably not what I wanted. It's okay. We'll just leave it with the toolbox, I guess. I have properties somewhere, I swear. There we go. So now we have the same type of application for iOS. We have a button that we can click. I have all the different controls. I can drag and drop those out with guidelines, auto layout support. Here, I'll just say zoom to fit, or I think there's 1-to-1. There we go. We can zoom in. Now we have this full iOS designer pulled right in. So if I wanted to change around this project, for instance, and put in a navigation controller, I can come out, add this in here. I can delete the sub. And now we can come in and say, this is the start of my application. I'll hold down on control and say, this is the root. So now it actually updates and it's a full iOS designer built right into Visual Studio 2017. So this is kind of the two different ways of starting a Xamarin application. Whether you're gonna do a blank application or just an Android, just an iOS application, everything is built right there inside the new templates. I also got to show off some new cool enterprise features like the remote iOS simulator, the profiler, and of course, the inspector. So let me go ahead and close that down really quick. Let me jump back over to the slide. Now, as we continue on in our journey of building applications, there's amazing new features inside of Visual Studio 2017. And when we talk back about the fundamentals of how we wanted to improve the first run experience, and we want to improve the installation experience and get developers up running, we also want to ensure that as you're building code and developing code, that you're able to essentially kind of make it a better experience of debugging your application and getting to where you need to be. So what we kind of saw is that, while software development, we're working in teams, we know that kind of we've switched to this like DevOps workflow. So we have tools like Visual Studio Team Service and Mobile Center to do that. it's still really important that, individual productivity itself really matters. And that's where the fundamentals come in. So if we look at the kind of like DevOps workflow, you can see we have like code editing, debugging, unit testing, code analysis. And then on the right-hand side is all the stuff that happens after your code leaves and goes off to source control and continuous integration and continuous deployment. So kind of all of this stuff has to happen until you can get everything back. So all of your unit tests and all that stuff, we have to do all these things over and over again. So we kind of thought that maybe we could do better in Visual Studio 2017. So kind of tighten up the initial cycle in the beginning before we do check-in. And how can we improve our code and also catch some issues before we go into production. So we shift back here, we can actually shift left our development cycle. So the idea is kind of building in some experiences in our development process in Visual Studio 2017 to shift that development. So if we kind of look here, there's a few improvements in editing continue and be able to use the inspector. I think also as we kind of tie some things back, we have some brand new features called live unit testing to essentially pull quality into the inner development loop. So as we're writing UI or unit tests into our application to run them live. And also some really new amazing source code analysis built right into Visual Studio 2017 that'll help us really improve our source code and unify as a team. And I want to mention though, and some of the things that we'll pull out here, is that all of this also leads up to the brand new version of C#, which is C# 7. I've just labeled a few of the awesome new features such as tuples and pattern matching and out variables and local functions. Down here, you can actually find a reference source of all of the brand new features in C# 7. I'm super crazy excited for them. Here's just a few of them here, which is the brand new tuple support. So being able to actually output multiple values instead of a single type. So I can say this is int max, min. I can create them in this return statement for max, min. And then I can actually say that this is the range, or I can actually return min max in this little variable type. Also, pattern matching is really cool because previously with switch statements, we could only ever just do integers. Now we can do real objects and we can cast them in real time and actually call additional methods against them. So here I'm passing in a IEnumerable of objects. I can say, is it 0? Is it an int? And which will automatically cast it to val. I can do a sublist and automatically say when there is something in there, else don't do anything. If it's null, for instance, break, else I have no idea what it is. So let me just actually show you some of these productivity improvements. So I have that same project open, the My Items project here. And what we're going to notice is that I wanted to start to evolve this application a little bit. So what I did is underneath the models, I have some new things. I want to kind of turn into a workout tracker. So I have athlete, I have a bike workout, I have a workout type that's inside of here. And as I start to kind of build out this application, I want to make sure that my code quality is high too. So I actually have some unit tests that are down here. So as I pull those out, what I want to say is that I actually have a test explorer over here. And we can see that it's actually starting to run my application and my unit tests. So inside of here, I have live unit tests and I've included it here. And as we scroll down, we're actually seeing some green check marks that this was covered by a test or it wasn't covered by a test inside of here. And as we scroll down, we're going to see that these are all good. But if I go into my models, into my portable class library, we can actually see that these are actually failing here inside. And more importantly, we can actually try to diagnose why they're having issues. So I can double tap on this failing unit test over here and I can say, oh, what's going on? So we can see is that this was expecting an argument null exception. So let's go ahead and just debug that selected test. And this is kind of, I like to show this off of some of the new Visual Studio features because at this point, I could be debugging any application. It could be iOS, Android, or in this case, a unit test application project. So what we're going to see down here is that we've ran into a null reference exception. And the first thing that our brand new exception handler is telling us is that the today's workout.notes was null. So the length here was causing the issue, which is no good at all. So I can get details, but it actually shows me right in the exception. I don't need to guess anymore. I can actually add that right here. So I could actually say, well, let me see my notes and let me see find all references. that's going to bring up my notes references here. And it's actually going to show me all of the areas that this is being used. So here is the actual constructor of notes equals notes. So that's probably where I want to solve it. But in the notes references, I can come in and I can say, show me and group by project definition or definitions. I don't have to guess where and what file it's in or what project it's in. I don't want to modify any of the tests. I want to modify the source code here. So let me go ahead and stop debugging. And now what we can do is we can say, well, if, let me go ahead in here and say if notes equals null. There we go. I'm just going to say throw. And the first thing that we'll notice down here is a new. And when I hit space, we're going to see that down here in the grouping is I have some brand new things such as classes and structures and enum. So I can actually fine tune it. So I can say only show me the exceptions that are here. And I'm going to say ANE, a null argument, or argument null exception. So by using the casings here, I can come in and say, let me see, and say name of the notes attribute. There we go. Now, what's really cool is that it's actually going to start to rerun all of my unit tests. And we can see that it's actually going to start to rerun these unit tests. And it's going through them here one at a time as I start to modify this code. And it'll actually show me that I can improve this code. We can see a few things here. You see these little dots that are here. Well, it's cool. All right, so the first thing that we're going to notice is that we have these little dots here that says, hey, you can actually throw and you can suppress things and you can throw something. We see that it's grayed out here because there's some simplified checks I can do. But as I was building this application, that unit test went to green. I didn't have to rerun it or do anything. If I look at the actual test that was failing before, I double click on it, there it is. You can see that this is here. We do have some things that aren't being covered, so we probably want to fix that up. But I'm actually doing it here. If I go ahead and refactor this and say, throw a new argument exception, we can see that it knows that it has to rerun some of the specific tests. It's not going to have to rerun all of them. But now when I go ahead and save, it will go ahead and start rerunning my live unit tests as I execute code, which is crazy. It's really cool. So I've already shown kind of some new null exceptions that are going on, live unit tests that are going on as I write my application. But I can go a little bit further in this application now that everything is all green. So if I kind of come into my athlete class over here as I'm starting to build this out, we can see a few things that are going on in here. The first thing I want to point out is that we have these little dots that are going on, and I can hit Control Dot, and then we'll bring this up, and it says use explicit type instead of var, which is interesting that it's recommending that to me. And the reason it's recommending it to me is because we've implemented and integrated in Visual Studio 2017 this thing called editor config. So if I can say Control T and I say editor config, we can see that there's a bunch of editor config files in this application, and we want the one that's in the shared code. So this is a way of describing what all of my teams or my projects infrastructure and naming styling should be. So here, for instance, we can look at var. So here's the var things that we have, and we want those to be true. We always want to use var, so we can come in and we can say, make that a suggestion, or if we want, we can make that a warning if we wanted to. But we'll make it a suggestion for right now. And as I come back into this class, we'll have the green dot, or the little dot again, and I can Control Dot. I can say, Control Dot, use var again. We can also see that inside of this editor config, we have this little green squiggly, and we can see that there's a violation here that it should actually be tweet today workout. So someone has named that incorrect. So boom, I'm improving my code quality as we go through. Additionally, though, there's some brand new C# 7 features that I can highlight. So the first thing that I'm doing is I have a little tuple here of the workout and calories that I may want to put into the application. So I can say get week's best workout, and it's going to return a new tuple to me. What we can see here is that I used to have to use item 1 and item 2, but now inside of here, I can actually say .calories that are being returned. Instead of item 1, I can come in and say use the explicit type of .workout. So this is a way of using brand new features inside of Visual Studio 2017 to refactor code. But it gets better, because if I come inside of here, we can see that I have this athlete class in this one file, But if I go into the bike workout class, I have a whole bunch of different classes inside of here. I have a workout type, I have a distance workout, I have a bike workout. And what I can now do is say control dot, and I can extract classes or files. So this is just a standalone workout. So I'm going to say control dot, and I'm going to say move this entire type out to a new class by that name. So there we go, it's gone. Over here we have a workout with all the namespaces that I need. Everything is correct. I can easily go ahead and start modifying this code and extracting code using kind of these brand new, really impressive features of Visual Studio 2017. So some brand new C#7 features, some live tests that are being run, and some brand new refactoring built right into Visual Studio 2017. Now, to kind of break things down a little bit further and talk about some of the other announcements that had, now that we've seen how to build some applications with Xamarin, how to leverage some new features of Visual Studio, of course, you can get that by going to visualstudio.com, like I mentioned earlier. What's really great with Visual Studio 2017 is that we've worked with tons of launch partners to launch over 500 extensions inside of Visual Studio 2017 that you can take advantage of today. On top of that, for Visual Studio Enterprise subscribers, there's some brand new features and value to the Enterprise subscription, including a full year to Pluralsight, 25 seats to Office 365 Dev, some Parasoft and White Source subscriptions as well. But don't forget, if you don't have Enterprise, and you may be on the Visual Studio Dev Essential program, there's some brand new and really awesome features that you can get advantage of. There's a new 3-month subscription to Ops Agility for Azure and DevOps training. You also get some additional Xamarin University training classes, Azure credits, and so much more. If you don't have Visual Studio Dev Essentials, you definitely want to sign up for it. You can go to aka.ms/devessentials, which is really awesome. We also announced a brand new preview of Visual Studio for Mac, Preview 4. This is your brand new IDE for Visual Studio Work for mobile-first, cloud-first scenarios on the Mac. So you can build Xamarin, ASP.NET Core, .NET Core applications right from your Mac, which is really awesome. And we also even announced, as part of the family, a brand new preview of Visual Studio Mobile Center, really enabling developers to build apps really easily, deploy them, build them, deploy them, test them, and get backend services and crash analytics easily across any application written in any language. You can go to aka.ms/mobile center to learn more. And hopefully you've seen how Visual Studio 2017 and Xamarin together, Xamarin for Visual Studio together, enable you to improve on building apps faster and fun and enjoyable as we've improved the fundamentals, connecting to the cloud easier, and even putting some DevOps into your normal coding flow, as you will. You can get started today by going to visualstudio.com to download Visual Studio, or xamarin.com to read all the great documentation. All of this code, including the new workout features and things that I've added that I've showed off, are available on my GitHub. And of course, we did an entire suite of videos and micro videos about all the awesome features in Visual Studio when you go to launch.visualstudio.com. I want to thank everyone for joining the webinar. Of course, you can email me anytime and tweet at me as well, and definitely follow me on my podcast and development show. And with that, I'd like to open it up for a little Q&A.